Welcome to A Date with Darkness podcast, where I will be discussing the impact of hurtful and abusive relationships and how to overcome them so that you can move through your pain and get to the kind of healthy relationships you want, need, and deserve. I'm Dr. Natalie Jones. I'm a licensed psychotherapist based in California. While I hope that you find this podcast educational and informational, please note it should not be substituted for treatment with a licensed mental health professional. Also, due to the nature of the podcast, some of the information presented on the show can be sensitive to some of my listeners, so please note that listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome back. Thank you guys so much for joining me for another episode of A Date with Darkness podcast. Today is July 4th, and this is like the July 4th week. How are you guys dealing with July 4th? Are you enjoying it? Are you doing anything fun with family, like hanging out or cooking out or doing something fabulous to kind of take care of yourselves? Hopefully you got the day off from work at the very least and maybe got to take a long weekend or something of the like. I know I did. I took what did I take? Well, I've been off since Wednesday of last week, so I took a very long respite, and it went by so fast. But anyhow, I wanted to actually, now they're kind of starting to pop off fireworks here. So that, I don't know if that happens where you guys are, where people, those little pop-up shops where they sell fireworks, as soon as they go up, people like, I don't know what it is, they're like drawn to it like a magnet, and they just like set off fireworks 24/7, even overnight. I'm like, oh boy, people are just like, there's something about things made with dynamite or any sort of explosive, I should say. People just go bonkers, and yeah, at least here anyway. But anyhow, I wanted to take some time out. I had a few listeners that have written in to me, and I want to get to some of their questions on the show. And I try to get to those questions as soon as I can. However, with me, I have a very creative mind, and the way a creative mind works for me, I can't say for all creatives, but I just know for me, I like to do what I'm called to do creatively. And so that day, the day I may be like feeling it like, oh, maybe I'll respond to this, but then like something is like more pressing, and then I'm like, no, I want to do this. I want to record this. It's like, I like, it's something I got to speak to now. And that's just kind of how I work. And I feel like when I get in that mood, like I got to respond to this now, I feel like creatively I'm going to be a lot more passionate and a lot more insightful. And not to say that I wouldn't be insightful about questions, but sometimes I feel like things have to strike me at the right time is what I'm trying to say. But nonetheless, I've had a few listeners write into me specifically. A lot of people write to me based off of my newsletter that I usually send out weekly. So if you're not on the newsletter yet, you want to head on over to drnataliejones.com and make sure you're signed up. So people read that and they write back to me. And so let me read one of the questions. And so the other thing I want to mention is, I've had a few that I said I wanted to respond to. So, because I've been resting and working on other projects and other work obligations that I'm called to do, I'm going to try to give you guys, I'm definitely going to give you guys 2 podcasts this week. So one of them is a listener question. The other one is a regular one that I want to do for you guys. So the question that, one of the listeners / subscribers wrote in and asked me, and I'm reading from my phone, is there a possibility that you can do an episode on how a narcissist reacts to no contact? I've sealed my address, removed my name from Google searches, and deleted all social media in anticipation of this person's release next year. And I want to be proactive about any risk upon their transition out of prison. That's a great question. So I'm going to, and thank you for bringing that up, because again, this is one of those shows that I've been meaning to do a podcast on: no contact, low contact, gray rock, all of those sorts of things. So this is a perfect segue into this. And so I'm going to respond to that listener's questions with just generalized feedback. And whenever I respond with generalized feedback, advice, whatever you want to call it, I want all of you to remember that everyone's situation is unique. It's not a one size fits all. And I think whenever you're tuning in, you're listening to anything, or you're reading anything that sort of falls in the category of self-help is very generalized. So if this doesn't work for you, you could just take what you need and leave the rest on the floor. But also, your situation could also be very different. For me, when I hear this situation, she's asking about when someone's released from prison. And so to me, that automatically adds a lethality component. And with lethality, there's a lot more danger than certain situations, than other situations maybe. So I want to preface that everyone's situation doesn't necessarily have the same level of risk. So again, take what you need and leave the rest on the floor. And everyone's situation is not applicable. To find advice or to get assistance with your particular situation, I always emphasize seeking out a mental health professional, to come up with a safety plan. And anytime someone's talking about no contact, to me, no contact is a safety plan. So I think that's definitely something that I want to put out there. But I don't know what this person's particular situation is other than what I just read in that email. So I don't know what may have led up to the incarceration or anything like that, if there were other things that were involved. But I'm just going to tell you just general situations. I feel like I always have to preface that. And you guys, I know you wonder, like, oh, why is she like saying that? There are people that will write to me and say, well, X, Y, and Z, and this isn't me. And again, there's like a level of self-importance that they want to outline. And I just want to preface any sort of self-help, is generalized feedback. The thing that you have to realize with no contact situation, and it doesn't even matter if the narcissist in your life went no contact first, or they sort of, when I say no contact for them, what I mean is blocked you, because I think there's a difference between a narcissist no contact and the other person's no contact. With a narcissist no contact, it gives the illusion that they're not interested, right? But anytime that you go no contact with them, what happens is there's a narcissistic injury. And a narcissistic injury is basically a wound to the ego, and where a person may feel devastated, they may feel ashamed, they may feel like there's an attack on their self-worth by an action that was done in the relationship. So they feel an injury. And in my professional opinion, when there's a narcissistic injury that is caused, that is actually the most dangerous time to be in a relationship with a narcissist, because they are projecting blame. Specifically, you caused this, or you made me react this way. That's sort of what their thinking is. You made me react this way. And there's also a feeling like they're losing control. A narcissist, the way that a relationship with a narcissist works is that they thrive by being in control. They are in control of you, and they're in control of the relationship dynamics, the emotional atmosphere, all of that. They want to be on top. And the minute that they feel like they're losing control is when they start to spiral, and they immediately want to get control and the upper hand back. And so this situation can play out a number of different ways when there's a wounded ego, right? If the person is, again, if they're incarcerated at the time, or if, let's say, they may be preoccupied with another relationship, or if they have access to certain resources and people. There's a number of ways that, the number of ways at which these factors can determine an outcome in a situation, and even then it can still be highly predictable. And domestic violence, and injury, narcissistic injury can be caused whether or not it's a lover, former lover, an ex-spouse, family member, you name it, it can be caused by whomever, friend, roommate situation. So the sort of disturbances can be caused by any, can affect any narcissist in your life. So even if this particular person sounds like is talking about an ex-partner, but I want you guys to be aware that this can affect any situation and where there's a narcissist in your life, right? When the ego is wounded and you've clearly set boundaries, right? And you've moved, or you're attempting to move on with your life, and you have stopped with the situation. And I think that's also another important piece. If you decide to go no contact isn't something that you can vacillate between. No contact means you absolutely are not contacting this person for any reason, like, ever. It doesn't mean that you might call them on Tuesdays and you just sort of dial back things a little bit. It doesn't mean that you're still looking at their social media and they can kind of see, or you kind of ride by their house. No contact means that you're not attempting to contact them for any reason. And I want to make that clear. I want to make that clear because I've had people say to me that I've gone no contact, but we talk, here and there, and like on special occasions and things like that's not low contact. Low contact means you never reach out to that person. Okay. And so I want to preface that with this, is that you've made that decision. First of all, you're making a decision in the relationship, and you're making a decision to determine how you want to better the quality of your life and how you want to move in this relationship. And a narcissist does not like that, which is what causes them to spiral. And it's almost like it can be like a how dare you? Like, what the hell are you doing? How dare you? Do this, like, what the hell is going on? And so in this particular situation, when we're talking about an intimate partnership, most of the time in the work, in working with narcissists, most of the time their default is like, okay, who else is there? Like, who is she dealing with? Who did she move on to? And like, what's going on? Like, who's the new person in her life, the new man or new partner in her life? Like, they want to know that information, and then they desire to get that control back because they feel disrespected by you making this decision. But they're also thinking, most of them, but not all of them, but a lot of narcissists are also thinking that your actions are very similar to what they would be doing. Like, so when a narcissist ghosts you, or they can't be contacted for any reason, or they're entertaining other relationships, and things like that, their automatic line of thinking is thinking that your behavior is very similar to what they would be doing in a situation. And that's not typically the case, but that's automatically their default. Is like, oh, you're disrespecting me, you're entertaining other people, in terms of a relationship, or what have you, which this person who wrote to me may or may not be doing. That's her prerogative, right? And so they want to find out more information about that, like, because their automatic go-to is, you don't get to do this, but I need to know. And so therefore the investigation begins. And again, going back to what I said about the resources, investigations begin in a number of different ways, depending on the amount of resources that you have. So even if a person is incarcerated, They will still have people maybe on the outside reach out to you, even if there's like if there's like a restraining order in place, right, and they're not supposed to contact you, they may still try to do that or get other people to do that. They may write letters, but if they have more resources and they have the freedom, which is what this person is worried about, they may go back to the default of like where you live, right? They may reach out to, and if they don't know where you live, and that's when like, okay, well, let me find out where this person lives. Um, and so they may use people that the two of you knew together. So if there's anybody that the two of you have in common, if you were talking to his family, or any members of his family, or the two of you have mutual friends, and if he can get in contact with them, they're going to do whatever they can to figure out what's going on with you and what's been not only where you're at, but what's been happening with you. Like, why did you disappear off the face of the earth? So they're going to try to definitely garner as much information as they can. They can, social media, again, start combing social media, looking for you there. So if anything, the web if you're one of those people who have mastered staying off the internet, then kudos to you. But most people have not been able to skillfully master that. I don't care if it's like, pictures from years ago and you have a private account. If you have any sort of digital footprint, you can be found. And there's a lot of, there's also a lot of like software and things like that that private investigators can use. So if this person has a little bit more resources like money, they can actually hire a professional to, seek you out or track you down. And, a lot of times, even when you hire a private investigator, the first thing they do is they say, well, you can't use this information in a malicious, they have to sort of give that disclaimer, but really and truthfully, they can't prevent a person from acting out dangerously once they get that information. And so that's something important to know. So they can hire somebody to look for you. They can have family members, they can have their friends, and in narcissistic lingo, this is called flying monkeys, which I don't really use that, but I just say they have people doing that. And then they're just sort of, again, ruminating on finding you and figuring out what's going on by any means necessary. So they may go back to, if they don't know where your current address is, they may go back to where you used to live, see if anybody that is still living there, like if you lived in an apartment or if you had neighbors or something like that, people that they knew of. They may try to go back and scour that. Try to tap into those people. And again, they're still obsessively thinking about this. This is, if they figure out where you are, their snooping proves to be fruitful, stalking begins again. And stalking, it happens on many different levels. Again, and now, unfortunately, there's things where you can be digitally stalked in addition to social media. Things can be put on someone's computers, things can be put in a person's home, things like that, where those are like monitoring devices and cameras and things like that. So again, it depends on the resources. And so they can begin stalking you in that way, riding by your home, parking outside, attempting to intimidate you, because a lot of times when a narcissist stalks you, they want you to know, right? Because they want you to feel their presence. They want you to be intimidated by that. So that's something that's also important to know. And if they find you and they're successful in their efforts in terms of finding you, they're going to confront you. They may call you. And another thing I forgot to mention is if they know where you worked or at least what field you were in. If you have a field like mine, like, any field like mine or medical fields or anything where you have to, be licensed by a licensing board, a lot of times you can go right to the board, and that's not to give people feedback or anything, but whether or not you want certain things, and I'll put like my PO box and things like that on file. But a lot of times you can go to the state board, and the addresses and things like that'll be retrieved. So be careful with any sort of digital footprint or any sort of things like that where you have to register. You can be found, right? So they're going to come. They may come by and actually start calling you, coming to your job, coming to your home, your new place, if they're successful in their efforts. All right. Again, this depends on several different factors. First of all, their sanity depends, their sanity and their impulsivity of a narcissist, right? Because just because someone was incarcerated doesn't necessarily mean that, they suddenly had a come to Jesus moment. It's like, I'll get in trouble for that. There's a lot of repeat offenders in prison. There's a lot of people that have go to jail several times, and they escalate each time. So just because incarceration does not necessarily stop a show, essentially. So again, that impulsivity and lethality play a big part into this, right? Whether or not this person has means and access to things. Another thing would be access to weapons or things like that in terms of dangerousness and lethality. And how vigilant, if they're on parole, just because they're discharged from prison doesn't mean that everyone who's discharged from prison is automatically put on parole. So a lot of times parole can be a safety factor too, in that they have to be accountable. My advice to you would be to, if this person is getting discharged from prison and they do have a parole officer, because it sounds like when they're going to be getting out and things, so it sounds like to a certain degree you're still keeping up with the situation for safety reasons, which is good. But I know in California, and I don't know how all prisons work, I can just talk about my experience in working with the California prison system. I would say that usually you can get parole information, like their parole officer information. They usually have that 30 days prior to release. That can change sometimes, but a lot of times they usually have it up to 30 days, and then just kind of keep up and make sure it doesn't change, that they're not discharged to another county and things like that, because those types of things can change. So just know that they could potentially come back as soon as they're discharged. So that's something to be mindful of. And the other thing to be mindful of is, I don't know your situation or not, but let's just say perhaps their violence with you led to their incarceration, or there was some aspect of you being involved as part of their incarceration. I've seen it to where people tend to blame their significant other and become much more enraged with that person, and blame them for whatever they may feel like they've lost, or blame them for their actions, or things like that. And so that can make them that much more dangerous and predatory, because now they feel like they have an axe to grind with you. It's no longer about the relationship, it's more about what you did to me, and I'm going to get you back for this. And so that can be very perseverative too. And I've seen it sometimes where people have very lifetime or long-term restraining orders, like 10 years restraining orders or something like that. And I still have worked with people who feel like that person disrespected them, and they're trying to figure out a way to contact them and see if they can get in touch with them, regardless of what they did. So again, the penal system doesn't necessarily stop that, and especially if this person has had multiple incarcerations. So if they have a history of being locked up multiple times, even if it's not with you or because of you, past relationships or previous offenses, doing time is easy. as long as they feel like they get what's due to them. So they obviously don't have a problem with going in and out of the system. So that's something for you to keep in mind. If they are on parole and their parole officer is running a tight ship and they're compliant with that, it does not mean that they're not still planning on what they want to do and how they want to go about this. Even if there's like they're involved in another relationship, and I've seen people be very calculating and just sort of perseverate and think about things for a long time. And so that's something for you to keep in mind. Narcissists perseverate and ruminate on things, even if you feel like, oh gosh, that was years ago. There's still perseveration and, an underlying emotion for a lot of narcissists is rage. And rage, oftentimes for them, is uncontrollable. And I remember when I worked with narcissists and antisocial folks and even borderline folks, part of what my teachings were and working with them in both the individual and group setting was teaching them how to manage rage, because if they can't get to you or they can't take it out on you, they may take it out on other people or even take it out on themselves in other self-destructive ways. So that's always an underlying emotion, that teaching them how to manage that and not act on those emotions and find a more appropriate emotions and words to fit what they're actually feeling, was another thing. So all of that to say is, I hope I answered your question, because sometimes I can just kind of go off on these little things that I'm thinking about and I want to make sure I catch everything. But, all of that to say is keep protecting yourself. And if this person, again, has access to resources and means, it does not mean that prison time has stopped them from trying to contact you and find you. In fact, they may be more motivated to do that now that they're out and they have they have their freedom back. So this is a time for you. What I would say is you need to find someone and safety plan a little bit more than what you have, because it sounds like you've taken great lengths to not be found, but you need to find someone to help you do safety planning in case you are found, and just how you can manage that and what you need to do. And I worked for domestic violence shelter for many years. You want to have access to your important documents. You want to be able to get away if you can. And you want to be able to protect yourself by any means necessary, because, again, if someone has a propensity for violence, the way you want to look at it is you want to make sure that you can, you want to make sure that you're going to fight for your life. So you want to be able to protect yourself by any means necessary. You want to have adequate training to do that. You don't want to wait until you get into a situation and feel like, oh, I better defend myself. If you can, you want to learn how to do it well in advance. And there's self-defense classes. There are, firearms training classes if need be. And just figuring out what you need to do. Again, making sure you have access to the parole officer, because you want to call and report a violation. In addition to calling 911, you definitely always want to call and report a violation, because parole will snap them up just like that, for usually any minor infraction, depending on the county and how diligent the officers are. But I've worked with parole and probation officers for a number of years, and but usually for some serious infractions or for contacting people that they have no business contacting, they'll usually get right on it in most cases. Again, I don't know everyone's case. I can just say, based on my experience. But I hope that that's helped you. So you want to be thinking like, you always kind of want to be thinking, unfortunately for you, I feel for your situation, because you do have to be hyper vigilant, but you also want to be very diligent in making sure you have means to protect yourself. You have a safety plan. You have people in your corner that know for you, that care for you, will also not disclose your location or anything about you. So you want to make sure, because that person definitely may tap into every angle, depending on how determined they are to find you and what sort of things have happened. So get with a therapist to manage your emotional health, to help you feel supported, have things ready to go in case you need to get out of a situation. If you have a job that you go to, if you live in an apartment complex, places where there's security, make sure you inform security and, change up your itinerary. Make sure you always have people with you or people that you check in with. Get some support for yourself on the day, days leading up to and day of, and maybe even days after that person's release if you need that. So have people that you can spend time with, and that are checking up on you to see how you're doing, because you're going to need to be as stabilized as much as possible if you can. Yeah, no contact is difficult for a number of reasons. It's difficult because a lot of times, if you're in a situation where it's very codependent, you two are very enmeshed, or you just had, even, with all of those factors, and you had someone that was in complete control, it can be very challenging to go no contact just on an emotional stance. But also, if you have the person on the other side that's not ready to go yet, that's something that you want to keep in mind. There for yourself. It's like, you did what you had to do, and a reasonable person um, can see that, but definitely take extra means to do that. And if you have any sort of digital footprint, I cannot stress that enough. And that's very hard to get rid of. But if you have a digital footprint, try as much as you can to get your digital footprint removed. And that's not always easy to do. It's not 100% fail proof. I don't necessarily recommend investing. I know that there's companies and things like that that say that they can do it, but you never really know until you know. Do as much labor as you can to protect yourself. So I hope that this helps, and I hope that this is useful for your situation. And I appreciate you writing in. Thank you guys so much for your time. Take care of yourselves. Stay safe and be well.